Okay. So this is part one of 3 parts that I've put together on using Tableau. Hold on, let's turn off the close. There we go. This part is pretty basic, but I will go through an actual Tableau workbook. So you'll get to see like how I click around and just like little tiny small things that once you see them, you think, oh, that's where that is, or oh, that will really help me out. So, and then parts 2 and 3 get more into dashboards and more advanced features, and harder techniques. So those are, a couple weeks from now, and then a couple weeks after that. But this should be, right in line with where you are in the course material, and it will help you to kind of progress your visuals and your dashboards a little bit as we move on to some more advanced things. So we'll go over choosing the right chart, design best practices, some things we've already covered in our discussions, but just to review, and then I'll do the demonstration. So what data you have really influences the chart that you choose, and it's really important that you choose a chart that makes sense for what you're trying to present. And just because Tableau will allow you to make a chart with data doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right chart to display what you're trying to display. So these are the common chart types in Tableau. There are others, but these are the ones that are used the most. So pie charts, which I would be happy to never see. I've never seen a pie chart and thought it was super useful. On a dashboard in particular, it kind of stands out in a way that makes it hard to look nice with everything else going on. But sometimes pie charts can be useful for hacking, like meters, but that's a little advanced for this class. But if you think about like gas gauges or whatever for metrics, I think you can kind of like use them to hack in that way, but in general, I'm not a huge fan. Bar charts are pretty common. Bar charts are nice because you can layer in additional data and get like a stacked bar chart, or as we did the bar and bar charts, which are also pretty handy. You'll see line charts a lot and scatter plots. Histograms we've already practiced with. The box and whisker plots are pretty common if you're looking at how the data is spread across a variable, or if you want to compare 2 groups or multiple groups to see how they're performing against each other in terms of like their median and their interquartile range, and then if there's any outliers in the data. So it's great for visualizing that. And then IC bubble charts. I don't think any of the data that we have is particularly favorable for bubble charts. So I'll have to find a good example of a bubble chart, but they're kind of hard to come by. Bubble charts are one of the charts that get used often inappropriately. So when I see them, it's like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. It's just a mess. So be careful with bubble charts. And then tree maps can be really cool for kind of showing parts of the whole. So those are common. Which one you should choose depends on a lot of things. This is a nice little diagram. If you only have one variable and it's not ordered, then a histogram is great because that shows you the distribution of that variable, or the density plot as well, or a box plot. If you have more than one variable, you can move over to the other side of the flow chart and then ask you even more questions like, are they similar? Do they have hierarchy? Are they ordered? So you can kind of work your way through charts like these. There's a bunch of these online. There's like other versions of sort of flow charts and different ways for choosing the right chart. But I think this one's pretty helpful in terms of, is a scatter plot appropriate, for example? And then the thing that this one doesn't consider is categorical versus numerical. So that's another thing to consider when you're choosing your charts as well. So there's a lot to think about. This is another way of looking at the same thing. So what are you trying to do? So this is kind of like a different approach to the same problem of what chart type should I choose? So if what you really want to do is show the relationship between two variables, a scatter plot is perfect for that. For 3 or more variables, that's where that infamous bubble chart comes in. If you really want to show the distribution of a variable, then your histogram or even you can just do the simple line density plot. And if you have 2 variables, then you've got your scatter plot. So if you're looking to compare, which is a really common thing, there's lots of options for that. So it kind of depends. Are you comparing amongst categories, or are you comparing something over time? So line charts are great for time ordered data. You can add in multiple categories on a line chart and color them so that you can see everything all in one place. So again, just another way of sorting out what it is that you would like to show and what's going to make most sense for your chart. Okay, so then as far as charts go in general, before we move on to just working in Tableau, some things generally you want to use the full axis. If you don't include 0 in your axis, you can run the risk of misleading the viewer because the axis will exaggerate a trend. So there are times when maybe it makes sense to not use the full axis, but you need to be careful that that it's clear what you're doing to the viewer, that they realize that it's not the full axis, so that you're not misleading them. Use consistent intervals. So like if you have time ordered data, each interval should be the same. So by day or by month or by quarter or whatever. But in Tableau, you can't switch back and forth anyway, but just something to think about if you were making a graph in Excel or something, and somehow you had your data in kind of different intervals, you would need to normalize them so they're all the same interval. It's great to simplify information that's not as important, and I'll show you an example of that visually. You can gray out background noise, removing, I frequently remove the grid lines. I don't really find them helpful. So that's, that information often can be taken out of the chart. And I'll show you an example of that. And then your legends and labels, just making sure they're clear. You can, in Tableau, you can rename them, so you can give them an alias. So even though Tableau will kind of guess at what you want to name them, but it's very easy to fix that. And then where you place them on the chart as well. I'll show you guys, if you haven't figured it out yet, how to make those floating on your dashboard so they don't take up like a fixed container spot, which is huge as far as design goes. So we'll cover that. And then for don'ts, you will notice in Tableau there is no 3D. It's strongly recommended not to do that, or like the blown apart pie charts. Just make it harder for the viewer to figure out what's going on and to compare one item against another, like a 3D bar against another 3D bar. So no 3D. If you can avoid it, don't use more than 6 colors, because after that, it's you're like playing this game of like, is that, pink or hot pink? And so if you have too many colors, it very quickly can be difficult to identify what's what on your chart. If you have more than 6 items in your legend, you might consider maybe a different chart type. There might be a better way of displaying your data, and that it's not a hard and fast rule. You can break it, but sorry, I'm trying to get rid of, it won't let me, this annoying bar. Okay. And then not forcing your viewers to do visual math and not overloading your charts. So putting too much information on one chart. And as far as the visual math goes, I can post some examples this week to go along with our discussion board. But if you provide a chart that has like 2 layers of information on it, or is comparing 2 things, and the key information, maybe let's say that you're trying to show, is actually like the delta between those 2, then it might be better to just graph the delta values rather than having them do the math themselves, like across each interval, if that makes sense. Okay, so now I'm going to move over to Tableau. So bear with me here. Okay. So the first thing I wanted to show you is just an idea. The data for this isn't great, so this is kind of a lame example. Like, why would you zoom in on this? But we're going to roll with it. So let's say, for example, on your dashboard, you have a bar chart and there's a couple values that are kind of a lot different than the others. Like maybe they're really small. And so when you're looking at the total, like if you look at this lower chart, you can't, really quite see based on the scale of the axis, like what those are. So maybe we want to zoom in on this lower region. So to do that, you can just literally like reduplicate the chart and then zoom in on the axis. But I wanted to show you how to move the axis over to the right to make it a little more clear that you're kind of providing like a zoomed in or blown up version of the chart. So here's my original chart. So I pulled the state and then profit, and there we go. I finally got rid of it. Okay, so I'm going to, normally I would just duplicate this, but I'm gonna just recreate it for you from scratch, just so you can follow along. As we get further along in the course, I probably won't do this as much, but sometimes I think it's helpful to watch somebody manipulate Tableau. So we've got the state and profit, and then we're filtering by region. Profit. And then I only want to look at the south. Okay. And then, like I said, I really don't like, actually, I'll do it later. And I accidentally pulled region over here, sorry. Okay, so state, so that looks the same as my chart here, except for the grid lines. And I want to move this axis over to the right. So one way to do that is I need to create a copy of this profit variable. So I would just go up here and duplicate it. And I already did that. So when you click that, it shows up here as copy. And then I'm going to drag that, if it will let me, to the left here of this. And then, so now I've got the same chart on, but I want it on top of each other. So if I drop down here, I can click dual axis, and it loves to change these to dots. So I'm going to right click and then mark type and put it back to bar for both of these. Okay. And then, so now it's basically just on top of itself, which is great. I don't need this legend, so I'm going to hide it. It's not helpful. And then I don't want to see this legend, so I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to format. I'm going to change the font to white. And then when I do that, I only see my axis over here. So then for the zooming in part, let's just edit the axis. So I right clicked. I can set a custom range. I think on my dashboard I did -10 to 10, but just for fun, let's put -5 to 5,000. And now I've got like this kind of zoomed in view so that the viewer can see that these are, sub 1K and kind of have a better idea of where these two values are. Obviously that blew up my other values like off the chart, but that's okay because we were just trying to show kind of a zoomed in feature. So if I wanted to, I could actually maybe I'll take this one off and put my even more zoomed in one up there. So that's that. Now I still have these grid lines in here, which I don't want, and I can either edit them on the chart. I can go back to the sheet and edit here, or I can edit it from my worksheet itself. So I'm going to go to format, and then I'm going to come over here to the lines, and I'm going to change grid lines to none. Okay, so now those are gone. And then you'll notice that I actually colored my chart, and let's say we don't want this title at all. We can just hide it. And then funny enough, we have to come back here. And I'm going to add my legend back, and I'm going to fix something. I need these colors to be the same so it doesn't show that as orange. Okay. And then anyway, sorry. So then the background color you can change by doing the fill. What did I select? Looks like I selected light gray, so now they match again. All right, so I not only just showed you the zoom in, I think I also just showed you like a bunch of small little things. So I hope that was helpful in terms of like formatting, especially removing grid lines, I think is a common choice. So now you can see that. The other thing you'll notice, the axes here, the x-axis shows the variables rotated, which is what I want, because otherwise you can't read them. If it were to show them horizontal and have them cut off, you can come up here and click rotate label, and you can do it on the sheet as well, and rotate those so that you can read them. So when you're doing your final checks on your graph, make sure, oh, and you know what else I got to fix? I made that font white, but I actually need to make it the same color as the background. Okay. Okay, another thing I wanted to show you was that you can highlight just one part of your graph, and this is a pretty effective tool. So if I'm in my example, I'm just covering South Region. Maybe I'm the South Region director, and that's all I need to really, that's my audience. That's what we're focused on. So I don't really need to have South, Central, and East be different colors because really I'm just trying to show that my region is unfortunately underperforming. So all I did for this was go to the legend and change these to gray, and then added in the labels here. So let's do that really quick. I think it might be faster if I duplicate, and then you can also, if you're working on something and you like just can't stand it, whatever you created, and you want to start over, you can come up there and clear your sheet. So we have the date by quarter and sales. And to change this, make sure you choose quarter and year. I know it's weird that they offer both, but, and then sales. It already knows that I want a line chart. I'm going to color by region. So I'm going to drag region over to the color mark, and it kept the formatting because it's smart and it knows that I already created this. So unfortunately, if you were to do this, it would not have remembered that, and they would have looked like, I don't know, something like this. Okay, and then but I don't want this. I just want to draw attention to the south. So like you just saw, I can come up here and edit those colors, and I chose to make them gray so that the south would stand out. I actually like the way the orange looked on the gray, but you don't have to leave it orange. You could make it purple. Still stands out, although in my opinion, I think the orange is better. I don't know what you guys think. I like the orange. Going back to that. Oops. Orange. I have to assign it. Okay. And then I need to add the labels now, because what I've done by removing the color from these three is I've sort of removed an important element. So I'm going to come up to region over here, and I'm just gonna drag it over to label, and then it adds my labels in, and they're already where I like them, so I'm done. And now I've taken a pretty standard line graph, but I've made it more effective for my particular audience by highlighting what they need to know. So, okay, another thing you can do when you add those labels is you can have them displayed. If you're going to do that, though, they by default will display, let's see, kind of to the right of the bar, which looks really funny and cluttered. So you can have them printed inside the bar. And let me think about this for a second. Where's my, it's not letting me click on my label because now it's in the bar. Interesting. Okay, that's fine. We'll just duplicate it. So let's clear this. Okay, so we've got sales and department. Sales, department. Perfect. Trying to think about how I don't often do this. Give me 1 second. Okay. Do. I know it's simple too. What did I do? Give me 1 minute. I'm going to pull up my PDF here. Okay. So we created our bars. Ah. Okay, it is a little weird. I got it. This is why I never do this. Okay, so we're actually going to come up here to analytics. And we're going to take a reference line by each cell. And then we're going to show the average. No, we'll do this sum because we want to show the total. We're going to change the label to value. Okay, there it is. So they show up here now on the right. And then I'm going to take off the line. And I'm good there. And then now I need to edit. So I'm going to right click on the label itself. Oops, if I need to change something, I can click edit, but I meant to click format. And then I'm going to put it I'm going to go to alignment, and I'm going to move it to the left and up to the center, and then which would matter if you increase the size of your bars. And then I'm going to also make the font white now because it's inside my bars. And then it looks like it's, let me, Okay, I'm gonna actually also take off the shading. So down here it says 50%. I'm gonna slide that down to 0. And then that way it's just in my bar. It doesn't have it didn't like shade, because that could confuse somebody if they're like, why is the end of the bar a different color? Okay, so that's that. Sorry about that. I don't do this very often, so I forget sometimes how to do that particular trick. But if you want to do it, it looks a lot cleaner than having them kind of like printed, especially if you have like a larger bar chart with more than 3 categories. So okay, I wanted to show you really quickly when you have maps that you can change the background base layer by right-clicking and going to background layers. So you can take off, or you can add, like, it's not going to show you very well here, but you can add county borders or zip code boundaries, all kinds of things. So you might play with it sometime. You can change like how washed out the background is. You can make it dark mode, which in this case I recommend actually for this particular one because it's easier to read the state names in that mode. And then there's also these data layers. They cut off on my screen, I'm sorry, but they have like some pre-populated data. I don't know how old it is, or you'd have to look into that, but it's their demographic data mostly. So, but anyway, I think for the most part, just knowing how to change the map background is really helpful. And then for map options, you can make it so that you can't pan and zoom. So maybe you don't want your viewer to, maybe you have it like zoomed into a certain area and you don't want them to like zoom out because it would kind of ruin the effect. You can turn that off, and you can turn on and off whatever you would like. So just to show you kind of that those options are there. And then there is nothing particularly special about this, and I apologize, but I don't remember what it was that I wanted to show you. Just, I guess, maybe an example of a box and whisker plot by category. So you can see pretty quickly, profit-wise, that the technology category is more profitable, but it also has a wider spread between its customer segments. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to talk to you guys about was back to that whole subject of choosing the right graph. So this is kind of the same data, but 3 different ways. Mind you, the pie chart doesn't have the time variable in it, but I'd be curious to know, to me, it's very obvious which of these 3 is the best choice, but I'd be curious to know what you guys think or what your opinion is. But as far as like which shows the most value and is easiest for the viewer to read. So, you know, you might have a different opinion, but to me, this is the way to go. So don't be afraid to try a couple different versions of your chart. Try it a couple different ways, look at it, and then decide which chart type works best for you and what story you're trying to tell. This chart might be perfectly fine if I only want to highlight furniture and I gray out the other lines, like I did for that previous example. But when I look at this right now, the way the colors are and the way that these are pretty similar, it just doesn't do a whole lot for me. So I wanted to kind of just show you what that all looks like side by side, something to think about. And then finally, the last thing. So I see this all the time. These will be turned in. Let me see if I can. I'm on a Mac, so I just want to clear this filter. And it won't let me. Okay, well, fine. Take state and put it back. Okay, This is how I see them all the time. Please, 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 if you're going to turn in a bar chart, this is not helpful to me. I have to like scroll to figure out what do I want to know. Are you trying to show me which states have the highest sales? Come up here and order it. And then now it's useful to me. I can see right away Massachusetts is leading in state sales. And then if I really want, I could see that Delaware was, way behind. So, okay. So that's what I have for demonstration today. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to answer those.
I have a quick question.
Okay.
For the bar graphs, for the bar graph, let's say, is it helpful just to have top 10 highest and top 10 lowest versus like having it all? Because I noticed with our last assignment, I wanted to show you like all the list names, but I was like, this is way too long. So I didn't know if it was very useful to just show you top 10, or is it useful to show you top
Yeah.
or top low sales or whatever, or whatever.
Mhm.
Like, is it better to have the side-by-side comparison, or is it better just to have one top 10?
I think it's better. I mean, it depends on what you're trying to show. That's really your call, but I do think on dashboards it is helpful. Um, you can decide based on, like for this, maybe top 10 makes a little more sense. But in other cases, top 5 might. To do that, you can create, I think, I wonder if the assignment, I can add it into the next one if it isn't covered by the time we meet again in your textbook. But you basically just create like a calculated field that will um, pull the top 10 and it'll be dynamic that way. So as new data comes in, if a state pulls ahead of another state or whatever, the top 10 will update dynamically, which is what you want. You don't want to create like a group of these 10, a static group, and then have it, miss out on like maybe if Kansas like pulls way ahead and New York drops way down or something. So yeah.
Okay.
And then in this case too, yeah, actually, I kind of like that idea of like showing either like the top 10 and the bottom 10 or the top 5 and the bottom 5. It does, so that you can kind of see like the disparity between the two. So I think that would be great too. So, but that's kind of your choice, and it depends on what else you have going on your dashboard.
Thank you.
Hmm. And this is a very boring, I just like there's really not much going on here, but I just wanted to show you how to sort those because the sorting makes a huge, huge difference.
I agree.
Okay, well, that's kind of it for today. The next one is May 14th and it'll be a little more advanced. So if you're feeling like you've got the hang of this and that was all fairly straightforward, hopefully the next one will be a little more challenging. And then let's see, we're going to cover part 2.
Sorry, I have another question.
Yeah.
So for add in text for when you want us to do like explain for last assignment, we had to explain what each graph meant and what the purpose of this graph was, right? Is there certain placements you want us to put them in, or can we kind of just free for all put them in certain areas? So I know you gave us an example of where you wanted certain text,
Oh, yeah.
So I didn't know if you had a certain way that you wanted us to write text in our dashboard.
I don't. It's totally up to you. Those were kind of guidelines to help people get accustomed to the concept of containers on here. But as you go forward, it'll be less structured, so you'll kind of get to decide how you structure your containers. But there was that one thing I told you about the floating legends. I'm hopefully this doesn't mess stuff up, but I just want to like pull a couple things over so I can. Okay, that this is awful, but so this legend here, if you click floating,
You can move it.
you can set it like over by your, I don't know, you can play with it, but And then I don't even know what this was. If it's not helpful, sometimes you don't need the title. So keep that in mind. Like your chart based off your axis labels, it might
Mhm.
be very clear what you're looking at already. And like your uh this is like super, super unhelpful. So I'm actually just gonna like take it off altogether. So see how I freed up that whole column now? And then if I'm like, well, people know what this chart is, I can take off the title. I mean, it's got, sales and quarter, and then this one doesn't have oh, it does have the labels, but they got cut off. So if that happens, you can come to here. Is it here? Yeah, and go to fit and tell it to, in this case, I want it to, oh, it didn't do it. Huh. I've never had it not make it fit. I wanted all my labels to show. Um, but if you have scroll bars, it's generally good to get rid of them. So let me see if I can make a scroll bar happen. Okay. So I generally don't like to see, unless you have like a really involved dashboard, but if you're just trying to like present something, having those is kind of problematic. So like you said, either simplify it down to like top 10. Or if like there's just one category that's not missing, you can come down here to fit and you can make it fit within that window. But obviously for this one, that's not great. But I just wanted to show you that because I think it's helpful. The floating legends fitting to the container. And then, yeah, we'll cover using some of these other container options next time, and we'll also cover tooltips and like doing some cool stuff with the tooltips, like adding like an image in them and adding more information when you hover over. Uh, so, so yeah, we'll cover that next time.
Okay, sweet. Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any questions,
Hi.
Maddie?
Yeah, you mentioned tree maps way
Mm.
early in the video, and I was just wondering how often you use those and if like visually they're just too much for a dashboard.
I think often they are. The problem with the tree maps is that you very quickly like have too small of containers for the text to show. And I don't know if you've played with them, but you might notice that. So like maybe 2 or 3 containers have like their label, but then it will drop the label for all the small ones, and you have to hover over them to see. So not that there's no value there. Like if your dashboard is interactive and people are going in and you have multiple screens, so like you can set up a dashboard to navigate through multiple pages or like have tabs across the top. So maybe you have a page that's more kind of focused on that view. So the tree map is a bit larger. Then the label, you'll see more of the labels, which is helpful. Or, you're expecting the user to like go and actually like hover over and kind of play with the visual itself. But it depends largely on, how many dimensions you have because um, and how similar in size your categories are. Because if your data is not that interesting and all your boxes are like kind of the same size or not very distinct, it just ends up looking like a mess of like tiny boxes. But if you really do have, I think I've seen it done with like the government budget, so then like DoD's like a big box, and then the next biggest box is like way less than that, and so that actually is interesting to kind of play with. So yeah, I don't see it a whole lot just for that reason, but I do think when the data is a good fit for it, it can be a really valuable tool.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm. I think the biggest trap students fall into when they're doing their final, so the data is kind of it's data, it's not like super cool or interesting data. It's just kind of what's available out there to use for like these kinds of sample problems. And so the biggest trap I think that students fall into is they really want to put in like what they feel is like something really fancy, like a tree map, but the data is not quite suited for it. And I think you can take a simple chart that maybe you think will be boring, like the line chart that I showed you with the South region highlighted. But if you just spend a little time on it to really make it shine and show uh, some kind of insight, then to me, that's way more valuable than using like some kind of rare chart type that's fancy or looks cool but doesn't offer the user a lot of um, insider information.
The bubble chart.
Like the bubble chart. Yeah. I'll have to find a couple of good examples. I have seen bubble charts in the wild where I'm like, okay, that's a good bubble chart. But when I see them with like the data that we have, it's like this isn't helpful at all. I don't know what I'm looking at. So make sure you always look at your final product and are like, if I were presenting this to somebody, would they get it? Would they see exactly what I want them to see without me having to like, you know, explain it to them or be like, no, see, do the math, look, see. So just something to keep in mind.
Are we ever going to do a bubble map or a tree chart in this class, like for an exercise?
I think so.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I mean, it's guided through the thing, so they now I can't remember, but they do, we do cover like kind of all the different types of charts. So I think you've done parts of the whole. Was that the last one? So after that, oh no, that's this week then, relating parts to the whole. Um, Maybe not, actually. That's a great question. I don't I don't think there is. I don't think the book walks you through creating a bubble chart now that I think about it. If you'd like, I can find like I'm sure there's an article or something out there about like creating a really cool and that could kind of show you, when an appropriate use of it was, but I'll post something anyway that to give you some ideas, but I don't think the sales data isn't really suited for it. So
Okay. I just was curious because I would wonder what we use a bubble chart because I saw it when I was doing the assignment yesterday and I was like, what the heck is this?
no.
Very
Yeah. I also saw it on the TED Talk way in the
Yeah, I think
beginning.
he had like a giant screen, right? So it worked.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. If you have a giant screen, you can make it work. That just reminded me though, I'll show you another little trick. Um, if you want to create, oh my gosh. Oh, I didn't want a dashboard. I just wanted a sheet. Okay. If you want to create a chart, but you're not exactly sure like what kind of chart you want, you can you can multi-select different things and then come over to show me and it will tell you which charts you can even apply to the data you've selected. So like I hate this, I don't like this, but I mean it tried, right? So if you're just looking for ideas, and actually that wasn't a bad start. I could have just moved some things around and made that work. But look, see, there you go. There's a bubble chart. So it's meant to show you, actually, it's color. Okay, so the way it defaulted, it's sized on profit. So this is how you would interpret this. The South is the least profitable, um, and has the least amount of sales because it's colored on sales. The East and Central are equally profitable because they have similar size, but the East does better. It has more sales, so it looks like the margins. Maddie, you're the accountant. Um, so more sales, but same profit. So the margins are probably better on Central's products. Did I say that right? and then the West is just sitting here somewhere in the middle. So, yeah, not. Do you see what I mean? Like there's information here, but can you pick it up quickly when you look at this?
Yeah, it just gives you a bubble and just one. There's two big circles and one.
Right. You can be like, okay, the South is something's up with the South, but then you
Yeah.
gotta like look at all your legends to figure out like, okay,
So-
but
Yeah.
right. And this
Yeah.
doesn't even tell you. So the only reason I know it's sized on profit is because of this. My legend doesn't even, I mean, you wouldn't even know that. You would have to add context somehow to your chart, like text or in the title to let the viewer know that the size was related to profit, or they wouldn't even pick up on that. So yeah, be very careful with the bubble charts.
Noted.
Well, thanks for joining, you guys.
Thank you for hosting. Really
course.
appreciate it.
Yeah. And then the next one is May 14th. So by then you'll have picked up a lot more skills, and we'll be focusing on some more fun kind of little things that I don't think the book really goes into. One of them being in the tooltips, you can like have links, and at my job, we'll actually have like dynamic links. So you can, I won't get this far into it, but you can actually, like if I have a, a map and each state has um, its own website related to whatever data I'm showing. So like maybe it's financial data. I can actually set the tooltip to hover over like Washington State and then have a link to like the Washington State budget website or something. And it will literally update. As long as the URLs are the only difference in the URL between one state and the other is the state name. I can do it. So I can click on any state and it will populate the state name into the URL and then take you to that specific URL. So you can get like pretty wild with the tooltips. You can also make them navigate to other pages on your dashboard. So anyway, I'll show you guys kind of how to add value to those tooltips, because when you have a dashboard and you're already conveying a lot of information, the tooltips come way in handy for your user in terms of like giving them some facts and figures about what they're looking at without having to like throw a bunch of charts or colors or lines or numbers at them or tables or whatever. So
I thought it was just because I looked at it and I was like, I'm just gonna put this in here, and I was like, I don't know what this does, and then now there's a purpose, so now I understand the purpose of the tooltip.
awesome. Okay, well, have a great evening.
You as well, thank you.
Yeah. Good night.